unit executives as well. So we have set a kind of a pedestal to try and demystify IT governance, the relevance or the importance of it. So now we try and focus on what is COBIT as an IT governance framework. So how it has been defined as a business framework for the governance and the management of the enterprise IT. COBIT is generic and is useful for the enterprises of all sizes, commercial, not for profit, or in the public sector, of course. COBIT5 is a next generation edition of ISAC's globally accepted framework, provides end-to-end business view of the governance of enterprise IT, which reflects the role of information and technology in creating the value for enterprises. COBIT5 enables IT to be governed and managed in a holistic manner for the entire enterprise, taking full end-to-end businesses and IT functional areas of responsibility, which primarily considering the IT-related interests of both the internal and external stakeholders. COBIT5, if we look at COBIT5, which actually builds on close to about more than 15 years of practical usage and application of the predecessors of COBIT by many enterprises, business organizations and users from, of course, as I said, business, IT, risk, security and assurance communities, which has been helping the enterprise leaders create optimal value from information and technology. So this happens by maintaining a balance amongst realizing the benefits, optimizing the risk levels, and of course the resource use. So COBIT is, the acronym for COBIT is Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. It's a framework created by ISAC for the information technology management and of course the IT governance. How COBIT5 evolved back in the mid-90s to where we are. It has gone through a series of iterations, both embraced and appreciated by the industry as such. And you can actually get into the ISAC website. The tangents are there on the screen. You can actually look at how COBIT has evolved over a period of time from being a control with respect to audit, now moving on to the management, the governance of enterprise IT. So there are certain fundamental drivers why COBIT5 was developed as an IT governance framework. The reason, one of the top reasons were provide more stakeholders a say in determining what they expect from information and related technology. So that is a point to ponder. Address the increasing dependency of enterprise success on external business and IT parties, dealing with the amount of information which has increased significantly, and deal with much more pervasive IT. I mean, IT is there everywhere. Provide guidance, further guidance in the areas of innovation and emerging technologies. Of course, innovation is one of the factors which helps organizations to build in value, and of course, the other tangents like profitability and things like that. Cover the full end-to-end business and IT functional responsibilities to get better control over increasing user-initiated and user-controlled IT solutions, what we see in today's world. We need to achieve the enterprise value creation through effective and innovative use of enterprise IT. We need to achieve enterprise business user satisfaction with IT engagements and service models. We need to achieve enterprise compliance with relevant laws, regulations, contractual agreements, and some of those internal policies. So they have been the drivers for why ISAC and of course the IT Governance Institute has contributed to come out with this COBIT5 IT governance framework. Yet another research done by PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in terms of trying to quantify the benefits of implementing COBIT5 governance framework. They've interviewed more than about 800 IT and business respondents across the geographic locations. And this is what they have to say. 38% of them respondents cited that lower IT costs as an outcome of governance of IT practices. So that is, sorry, missed it. So that is a big benefit. 28% of the respondents cited that there's been an improved business competitiveness, which is good news. 27% of the respondents indicated an improved return on investment. So this is again a good news. There have been less tangible benefits as well reported, such as management of IT-related risks. Say 42% of the respondents believe that the management of IT-related risks has been a lot more effective. Improved communication and relationship between business and IT. This is can be a tangible, intangible as well. And improved IT delivery of business objectives. So there's, if you see again, so there has been significant benefits of implementing COBIT5 IT governance framework. So if you look at COBIT as a framework, the COBIT5 as a framework, it is relatively new in the market, in the industry, and there has already been quantified benefits found out from the industry with respect to its implementation. So we'll now probably put our thoughts to try and understand or try to focus on the architecture of COBIT, how COBIT derives the value of IT governance in its full sense. So COBIT5 is based on 5 key principles for both governance and management of enterprise IT. So it starts with meeting the stakeholder needs, the entire enterprise, covering the entire enterprise end to end, coming out with a single integrated framework for achieving the IT governance objectives, having a holistic approach, and of course we need to understand the difference between what is governance and management. So COBIT5 clearly sets out the aspects of what is governance and what is management, basically the activities which is part of governance and management. So if you look at the COBIT5 architecture, it is at the top is the value creation, understanding the stakeholder needs, governance objectives. There are enablers, basically the processes, some significant amount of expertise developed, like a knowledge base, and the set of products. So COBIT5, the building block of COBIT5 is the architecture. In terms of the architecture are these 5 key principles, which will probably spend a little more time to understand each one of them in terms of what they are and what do they say about in terms of the implementation of the framework. The first principle, meeting stakeholder needs. Enterprise, we all know that enterprise basically exists to create value for our stakeholders. So value is created by maintaining a balance between the realization of benefits, the optimization of risk, basically in terms of anticipating, controlling or mitigating the risks, and of course the effective use of resources. So an enterprise can basically customize COBIT5 to suit its own context. So this, please keep in your mind, COBIT5 is customizable based on a specific organization's specific needs. So this customization is done through a method called the goals cascade method, translating these enterprise goals into, say, very specific manageable IT-related goals, and mapping these goals to certain processes and practices. So this is an important aspect of meeting the stakeholder needs. So what we'll do is try and understand how. Stakeholder drivers. What drives the stakeholder? Basically the environment, the technology evolution and things like that, which influence the stakeholder needs, where we need to realize the business benefits, risk optimization, resource optimization, which basically will cascade to an enterprise goal, which then gets transformed into IT-related goals. And achieving these IT-related goals is through what COBIT5 calls it as the enablers. So we try to understand each one of them a little more. The first step, stakeholder drivers influence the stakeholder needs. Example, say strategy changes, changing business and regulatory environment, and say new technologies. Uh, the stakeholders' needs transform into enterprise goals. Uh, these goals can be generic goals. It can be developed using a balanced scorecard method where the entire management, the senior management, the business executives, the executive management will brainstorm using a balanced scorecard sheet to put up what are those enterprise goals. Basically, it's a list of commonly used goals that an enterprise might define for itself. Most of these enterprise-specific goals can be mapped easily onto one or more generic enterprise goals. COBIT5 basically defines 17 generic goals, which includes information in terms of a balanced scorecard, uh, the specific enterprise goals as well, and a relationship between the three main governance objectives. As we said here in the previous slide, we talked about business benefit realization, risk optimization, and resource optimization. So they are going to be mapped with these three objectives. This is a classic view of a balanced scorecard sheet. The COBIT5 goals cascade, they're striped into 4 categories, what we call the dimensions: the financial, the customer, the internal customers, learning and growth. It has been mapped to the benefits realization, the risk optimization, and resource optimization. These are basically the enterprise goals. These enterprise goals, whatever listed here, 17, they are not complete. Organizations can add their own because these are very generic. It still reflects a large section of the business world. Specific industries, organizations can identify their own enterprise goals and map these goals to how we are going to related to the governance objectives, basically in terms of benefits realization, risk optimization, and resource optimization. P stands for the primary relationship. That is, a strong relationship will exist between the enterprise goals and which of these governance objectives. S is basically a secondary relationship. It's like less strong relationship. Now, the enterprise goals, once you brainstorm, it goes through a lot of iterations before an organization will have those goals. So once the enterprise goals are mapped and documented in a business balance scorecard, then these goals need to be cascaded to IT-related goals. So again, the IT dimensions in terms of financial, customer, internal, and learning and growth. So the enterprise goals are now going to be transformed or mapped to the IT-related goals. There are close to about 17. This is again very generic. Every organization can add upon to this list. So once IT-related goals are, the enterprise goals are mapped to IT-related goals, all that the organization needs to do is map these IT-related goals to what we call the enablers. Enablers are basically in terms of the implementation, the processes, the policies, the framework, the people, the skills, the behaviors, the competencies required for an entire organization to map the business objective or the enterprise goals to the IT goals and in terms of the implementation. So the IT related goals will be cascaded to enabler goals. So we'll actually see the enabler goals in a little more. So the principle 2 basically talks about covering the entire enterprise end to end. It talks about how these governance objectives, the value creation aspects, are actually achieved or covered. So basically we have two aspects to it. One is the governance enablers and one is the governance scope. And of course we'll define the roles, the activities, and the relationships. So enablers are nothing but organization resources for governance. as I said, the principles, the frameworks, the structures required, the processes, the practices, the enterprise resources, like say service capability in terms of say IT infrastructure, applications, people and information. Only point we need to be a little cautious here is lack of resources or say lack of enablers may affect the ability of the enterprise to realize those values. So this is of primary importance which we need to ponder over. The scope of governance basically talks about governance can be applied to either an entire enterprise, a specific entity, or it can be a tangible or an intangible asset. So we can define our own scope in terms of how or where we want to implement these aspects. Then we'll define the roles, the activities, and of course the relationship. This is mostly in terms of who is involved in governance, how they are involved, what they do, how they interact within the scope of any governance system. And there is a very well established mapping of the roles, activities, and the relationship. This is mostly in terms of the implementation. Principle 3 is applying a single integrated framework. If you if you jog your memory, sometime back we said that COBIT5 has evolved from the predecessors. This COBIT5 is, it integrates knowledge previously dispersed over other frameworks like COBIT, the predecessors of COBIT, VAL IT, Risk IT, and other aspects. So together it's more a collection of the best practices put together to achieve those business objectives, the enterprise value creation. Enabling a holistic approach. This principle 4 and of course the principle 5 is mostly in terms of how do we implement these governance frameworks, the COBIT5 governance frameworks. So we have the principle 4 in terms of the COBIT5 enablers. So enablers are nothing but the organization resources which we are going to use to achieve those values. Enablers are factors which, let's say, individually or collectively can influence something, whether something is going to work or not. So there are 7 categories of enablers, principles, policies, and frameworks that are the vehicles to translate the desired behaviors into practical guidance in terms of day-to-day management. Processes, of course, we all know very well. They describe an organized set of activities to achieve certain objectives, and of course which will produce certain outputs. The organization structures are more in terms of what we call it as the key decision-making entities in an organization or in an enterprise. Paramount importance here is the 4th, culture, the ethics, and behavior. Of course, it is still an underestimated aspect of the business, but it needs to be dealt with. And enablers, one of the enablers is the information itself. Information, as we know, is pervasive throughout an organization. It includes, say for example, information produced and used by the entire enterprise itself. So information is basically required for keeping the organization running and well governed. But at the operational level, information is very often the key product of the enterprise itself. So everything revolves around information. And then of course, the services, the infrastructure, and applications. Say we can actually include the infrastructure, technology, applications that basically provide the enterprise with information technology processing and services. It's something interesting. And of course, the underlying aspect of the enablers are the people, the skills, and the competencies, which are basically linked to people. They are required for successful completion of all activities and for making correct decisions and taking corrective actions if they are not. Excuse. There's a large dimension to these enablers. So all enablers, they basically have a common dimensions. This is, as I said again, I'm reiterating, the principle 4 and principle 5 is mostly from the implementation of IT governance. The enabler dimensions, there are 4 common dimensions for enablers. As I said, stakeholders, the goals, the life cycle, and of course the good practices. So stakeholders, each enabler has a stakeholder. So at in a simple way, to put it in a simple way, stakeholder is like it can be a party who plays an active role, and he has an interest, he or she has an interest in a specific enabler. Goals, each enabler has numerous or a number of goals, and basically which can be measured in terms of, say for example, what is the expected outcome of a particular enabler. And then most important is it has a full life cycle approach. Each enabler has a life cycle from its inception through an operational life until it is disposed. The phases of the life cycle can be planning, designing, build, acquire, create and implement a specific enabler, how to use and operate, evaluate, monitor, update and close. Good practices as a name, what are the current sort of good practices we need, and what are the work products which would come out in terms of an input and output for these enablers. Again, most importantly here is in terms of the enabler performance management. So enabler dimension is more in terms of the strategy. The enabler performance management is more in terms of the monitoring. So enterprises basically expect positive outcomes from the applications and use of these enablers. Say for example, we want to know, for example, say our stakeholders' needs addressed, our enabler goals achieved, is the enabler lifecycle managed well, and are good practices applied. So the first two basically in terms of stakeholder needs being addressed and enabler goals being addressed, they actually deal with the actual outcome of a particular enabler. So we call it as a lag indicator. So there are some terms and terminologies that we need to be aware of. Of course, being from the IT industry, predominantly we are used to it. The last two which talks about is the life cycle managed or good practices applied. They are called basically the lead indicators. They talk about the actual functioning of the enabler itself. So this is in terms of the implementation. So there is a dimension to the enablers, so which will help us to understand how the implementation will be more effective. Principle 5, in line with Principle 4, tries to define clearly, very precisely, in a crisp manner, what is governance and what is management. How different are they? Governance is more the big picture. It ensures like what are the stakeholder needs, how do we determine those objectives which we need to achieve, how do we set directions, how do we or what decisions we make, how do we monitor the performance, etc. Management is basically in terms of planning, building, execution, of course, for monitoring the activities, and in alignment with the directions set by the governance framework. So in most enterprises, if we look back, enterprise governance, sorry, I think mouse over. Okay, enterprise governance is basically the responsibility of the board of directors under the leadership of a chairman. In most enterprises, management is the responsibility of the executive management under the leadership of a CEO or a CIO or a CDO. So this is something which we need to remember. Okay, this gives a better idea about the understanding or definition of governance and management. So governance basically talks about evaluating the customer needs, directing, coming out with objectives, directing those objectives, monitoring how they are performing. So management is, as I said, planning, building, execution, and monitoring. So governance contains five processes. Within each process, there will be something like evaluate, direct, and monitor the practices. We can probably come back here. These 5 domains are, if I can try to read from the governance framework, These 5 basically are here. So governance is at the top of the umbrella. Evaluate, direct, and monitor. The 5 governance processes. Basically, they are nothing but ensure governance framework setting and maintenance, ensure benefits are delivered, the risk optimization, stakeholder transparency. They're all here. Then in terms of management, the management contains 4 domains in lines with the responsibility areas of planning, building, and running and monitoring. So align, plan, and organize in terms of the enablers, build, acquire, and implement, deliver, service, and support, and monitor, evaluate, and asset. This is one of the biggest advantage of COBIT5. It is this framework, whatever we see on the screen right now, in terms of the governance and the management aspects,